Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Post New Year. It's post New Year. Today's the 4th.
January 4th, 2021. The Space Odyssey.
I thought it was 2001, The Space Odyssey, not 2021.
Oh, yeah. Oh.
You're just 20 years late.
You can't be late to a Space Odyssey.
Well, apparently you slept through the past 2 decades.
That was...
Because I watched 2001 back in 1968.
Oh,
when it came out.
See, and I've never seen that.
I've watched it a few times. I actually went to the theater back in 1968 to watch it with my older brother. Preston and I went together, and I never really understood the ending. And since you've never seen the movie, you can't tell me what it is. But I've never really understood quite the aspect of the dimensional change that the astronaut goes through at the end. I don't want to ruin it for you because I know you probably want to watch it tonight.
You can spoiler alert. I'm not gonna.
I can't spoiler alert because I don't understand the movie. The only part I really understood is at the very beginning when early man, which was more of a chimpanzee, touched this obelisk, and all of a sudden knowledge was granted and humans evolved.
So he wrote this off of the Bible, the Garden of the Fruit of Knowledge, right? Is it kind of a parallel? Is that I haven't seen the movie, so I can't even.
I didn't really think of a biblical context in the way that was, but maybe a gazillion years ago they would have interpreted it that way. I don't know.
Yeah,
but
because when ape touches an obelisk,
big rectangular thing.
Oh, that's the thing they found in the desert. Didn't they find?
Well, they found one, but that is so.
It disappeared.
2021
Space Odyssey.
I think we're experiencing it right now.
It's every 20 years you get a. Sorry.
No.
I need to watch the movie because I've never seen it. So
I want you to watch the movie, and then I want you to tell me exactly what you think the ending is.
Okay.
About. Because I still never really been 100% on the ending. Well, but I like the movie. It's got great music in it too.
Music?
Mm-hmm. A lot of.
So wait, you saw this in
1968. I was approximately 3 years old. No. Unfortunately, in 1968, I would have been 15, 16. And
so it had really good music. So they were just they weren't talking. They would just put words up on, but the music was playing the whole time. So it was like a silent movie. Is that what they call it?
Well,
I'm just kidding.
They were playing waltzes and things like that. It was kind of goes with the space, and it was all really good. Huh. It makes you want to waltz.
I'm gonna watch it. I'm gonna watch probably the trailer, or maybe the Cliff Notes.
Watch the Cliff Notes as long as you get to the end.
So I have
and
to
you
watch
find out what the end what it tells you.
I have to find them. That's really complicated now. You ever you think of a movie and you're like, I want to go watch that movie, and then you don't really know where to go get it because there's not a Blockbuster. Remember, you used to be able to go to Blockbuster and get any movie.
I know.
You can't go there anymore.
You drive by all the locations that were Blockbusters, and they're still empty.
They sell mattresses.
Well, I
had no idea mattresses were more popular than Blockbuster.
Well, maybe the Blockbuster led to needing more mattresses.
Yeah. Well, I know, and I think people change their mattresses out a lot more than I do.
Yeah, me too. As a matter of fact, I woke up this morning thinking, my back's kind of sore. I probably need a new mattress, but I won't move on it too quickly.
They're expensive.
They are expensive, and you don't want to cheap out on a mattress because you spend a third of your life there, and most of it unconscious.
Never thought of
it. If I'm going to be unconscious, I want to be comfortable.
I've only had two things that I would prefer not to skimp on, and they've usually been entertainment and medication, and never in that order. But Those are the, so that if
Are you talking about legal medication?
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Like not getting the CVS brand of aspirin.
Oh,
or,
yeah,
or Aleve. Like, why not just get the Aleve? It's my comment whenever somebody says, "Well, it drives just like a
Mercedes.
Mercedes." Then why not get a Mercedes?
See, that is my thought completely on food. When people say, "Hey Kip, have you ever eaten armadillo? Hey Kip, have you ever had possum? Oh Kip, have you ever had whatever tarantula?" And then I'll say, "No, no, no," and they'll say, "Well, it tastes just like chicken." I said, "That's fine. I eat real chicken. I don't need artificial chicken. So
No.
I eat real chicken."
That's like the Burger King burger. That's it's vegetables, but it tastes like beef.
Fake meat.
Fake meat.
And I've read about fake meat. It takes so many chemicals to create the fake meat that it's unhealthy compared to real meat.
Yeah.
It's like 80 something chemicals needed to make a patty.
Huh.
Yeah, it's amazing. So I don't eat fake meat either. So, but I do eat real chicken. I'm not eating artificial chicken.
I didn't know you could find artificial chicken.
Well, I'm talking about armadillo. All the things that people say it tastes just like chicken.
That's true. That's really funny. That
Everything tastes like chicken. Oh,
Yeah.
well then if it tastes like chicken, I'll eat chicken.
Yeah.
Hey, today is the 4th. What do you want to say?
No, I'm with you. I never thought about the chicken thing, but I'm with you. I'm with you. Same thing.
I bet your wife would say the same thing. I bet she doesn't eat artificial chicken things.
Not if she knew it. No, probably not. I don't know. So wait, the 4th of January, you know what?
What?
Yesterday was my birthday.
Happy birthday. Belated birthday. Happy
Thanks.
belated birthday.
Yeah.
57.
I'm doing well. It's funny now. I've reached this age. I can look back on my life.
You hurt more, don't you?
I do. And one of the things that one of the funny things that I noticed is now mid-afternoon, after lunch, I don't even know what you call it. Or I drink coffee. So the coffee, and then I can feel the coffee bring me back to life. Yeah.
Oh.
And so I think before then I was just drinking coffee for fun. I like the taste of it.
If coffee would taste as great as it smells, I'd probably drink it. But I'm not a big coffee drinker. I like tea. I like hot tea.
I like tea.
I like tea, and so I drink tea every day.
I like the taste of coffee. It's bitter.
And see, it's that very thing that's it kind of gets back to the artificial chicken. Why do I want to drink something that doesn't taste so great?
Yeah, well, I mean that's your opinion.
That is a very good point, and I'm really sorry I brought it up. That's doggone it.
Your opinion doesn't matter.
It really doesn't.
To me.
Well, and particularly since you're a year older.
I know because the older you get, the more you could care less about other people's opinions.
Well, you hurt so bad, you don't have time to worry about it.
Right.
Last week, I found out something last week. At my advanced age, I'm 67. I'll be 68 in May.
I thought you were 65.
Huh.
Okay.
I carry my age.
You do?
I carry my age.
I thought you said you were 65.
I'm 67. I was 68 in May, which amazes me. I used to think that was old, but it's not.
No.
But I did find last week, because I was making inquiries about the vaccine for COVID, and apparently, even at my advanced age, they told me that I'm too young, and I'm in too good a shape, and that I have to wait. And
Yeah.
so I'm awaiting, but that did not preclude the week before where I thought I was going to die when I had that intestinal bug. Oh my stars! People were saying I had COVID all the week of Christmas. I thought I was going to die. It was bad. I felt like someone, not even just someone, I felt like there were 10 men hitting me in the abdomen with baseball bats. And it was...
Is that the scurvy?
I called it the flaming doodaloos.
Oh man!
The dysentery when it was all bad.
Well, that's gross.
Bad. It was gross.
Well,
it was terrible.
So probably worse than some people's experience with COVID-19. I'm just saying.
You know, I thought the same thing because it lasted for like a week.
Yeah.
I just, oh
And,
God.
and you would probably hope you lose your sense of smell with that.
Actually, well, unfortunately, I have no smell. My olfactory senses left me like 20 years ago. I've never been able to smell.
Wow.
And I don't, and they, there's no, my olfactory senses just died decades ago, and so I can't use that as a
As a
COVID. I think I had COVID.
Yeah.
Because if that was the case, I had it 20 years ago.
interesting.
Yeah, it's sad.
Huh. Well,
Yeah.
so I did some research and I
Uh-oh.
found out that church that I was talking about,
Yeah.
they've been steady having super spreader events every Sunday and Wednesday, twice on Sunday. They
While they continue to have church, do they have fewer members attending each Sunday?
no.
So they have new members
in
coming
fact,
each Sunday.
they full choir, and what I would like to see is what is to me becoming an oxymoron statement: investigative reporting on the congregation. And
Chris Nakamoto is going to come look you up in your.
well, I'm just saying, go look into it and just present people with the truth, and instead of scaring people. Like I told you, my 7-year-old thought that everybody that gets it dies.
Dies.
It's just not. I don't abide by fear. Well, man, I'm scared of things. Sure. Speaking of, we need to roll into this. What I would think was an extremely fearful moment in our early birth as a country. The Battle of New Orleans.
Ooh, I wish we had music to go with that.
I'll put some.
Oh, yeah, okay. A Rage Against the Machine might work into that.
Ooh, I can't copyright.
Oh, yeah, okay. Well, then make up your own.
Yeah, I'll do my own.
Let your
rendition
fingers
of a,
do the.
I'll do my own rendition of yeah, because
What's important, because, January 8th, 4 days from now, Friday, will be the 205th anniversary of the Battle of New Orleans.
205 years.
205 years, in 1815, January 8th, 1815 was the main battle. A lot of people don't know about, they just know about the Battle of New Orleans and that we won, and that there was a peace treaty that had already been signed weeks before, and it didn't really matter.
So I did some research.
Oh, hit me with the research.
I talked to a buddy of mine.
Is this the same one that we talked about last week about the Bonnie Blue flag? And
Yeah,
the West Florida
actually it
Republic?
is. I'm telling you, he's a treasure trove
I
of
love
information.
it. I love it.
And,
What did he tell us?
Because I told him when I said the Battle of New Orleans, he just like,
the man.
It was like, wait a second, you're not ready for this. And he told me some things that I'll never find in history books, and I don't know if they're true. And we'll see once we get into this story.
I have a great. I see the 4 or 5 greats. I forgot grandfather that actually fought in the Battle of New Orleans.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was supposedly this was they call it a ragtag bunch of guys.
That's true.
Who Andrew Jackson had to get together to
true.
fight. But thankfully, since this is the sportsman's paradise,
They all could shoot.
Everybody was a good shot, so they didn't miss a whole lot. All those sea leg redcoats,
Oh yeah.
they were still
They were still throwing up.
Yeah, they were trying to lob lead over the. Anyway,
a lot of those people, unfortunately, on both sides, English and American, unfortunately, they were suffering from dysentery at that time because food was not.
life was so much harder.
Life
then.
was hard then.
It was not. It was something we can. I mean, you said you're about to be 60.
Yeah, 60. I'll be 68.
Yeah.
May.
Life was harder for you than it was for me.
Thank you for admitting it.
I do believe that.
Thank you for admitting
I think that every generation had it harder than the one before, and that's why you end up with this. I'm trying to think of the right way to say this culture currently that we're living in, coddled, I guess, is a good way to say it.
That's good.
In a bubble.
Like
So,
coddled milk.
yeah.
That's
That's what it turns into after it's been coddled. Yeah.
Well, what else did he tell you about Babel?
So he said that there was there was a part where I don't know if you want to give too much backstory on this because
No, I wanna hear
I'm
what
going to
you have
jump
to
into
say.
the front of it.
Okay,
There was a part where the British were coming in, and I guess Andrew Jackson had this line going across that he had built up, or they had built up, and they had what do you call it? I can't remember now. The ladders that go up. So you'd have one group of guys.
You
going
just
up
said
the
it,
bridge.
ladders that go up.
Yeah, but they were calling. He was calling it something.
Fascines.
Is that what it's called? Oh, you're just making it up.
No.
So, and there was one group of guys, and so there was another commander, and there was a general, and there was a commander who was actually having an affair with the general's wife, and so the general had told this commander to run up, with the ladders, and the general knew that it was a suicide mission because the commander knew that he was messing around with his wife. There's like this big love triangle. We gotta look into it some more.
Well, that's like David and Bathsheba. That's pretty
Yeah,
cool. That's
yeah.
interesting.
And he was sending them out and so the guy was like, "No, we're not going." So a bunch of people didn't rush the. So in his story, there was kind of like some. The British got it all wrong on a lot of different fronts. They were overconfident with the amount of men that they had, and the Americans were fighting with. And
Yeah, Russell, you did do a lot of
supposedly there was some internal turmoil going on with some of the now again I have no idea.
Well, no,
he was
you're doing good.
He was telling me the story, and I'm just
People,
I loved it.
People discount the Battle of New Orleans and its importance.
Yeah.
But the reality is, the British had had their eyes on New Orleans since the 1770s, before the American Revolution, because they realized if you held New Orleans, you held the center of the continent.
Continent, yeah.
And so since the 1770s, the British had planned some type of military event to take New Orleans in some way or another. And of course, with the advent of the American Revolution, they got caught up with that, and then they got caught up with Napoleon.
All right.
And so they just never had the opportunity to do it. And they finally did in 1814.
I thought it was 1812.
Well, the war began in 1812, but
Okay.
the Battle
Oh,
of
the
New
Battle of
Orleans
New Orleans.
took
Right.
place in 18. Actually, they gathered in 1814, and then they fought in early 1815.
Because like in 1812, correct me if I'm wrong, there was some nonsense going on up in Detroit, and there was some.
That's one of the areas.
They were fighting over Detroit with Canadians, maybe.
Well,
Or were the Canadians? But that was more of the
that was English. That was England because England held Canada
Canada
as a territory.
Yeah, because it wasn't like the state. I mean, it wasn't the lines when you look at a map these days. The lines weren't always there.
No, all the lines you see nowadays they're all politically created in the first place.
Yeah.
The other important thing is you probably heard about the fact that the British Navy impressed sailors. They would go up to ships that were sailing in the ocean, and they'd go board them, and they'd say, "Okay, you're a British seaman, you're a British seaman, you're a British seaman," and they take these sailors on board their own ships to have personnel.
Yeah.
And you never really heard too much about that, other than the fact that we knew Britain was doing that, and you never really. But
So they were like carjacking.
that's right. They were shipjacking,
boat jacking.
and
Ships.
they impressed over 5,000 American sailors. It was not just a small number of people that they
What do
took
you mean
away.
impressed?
That's the word they called for going on board, taking someone and putting them on your ship. You impress them over onto your ship.
Okay.
And
I thought you were like, come look in my boat. That's not how British speak.
no.
Please.
Nothing about pictures and all that kind of stuff. They stole them. They stole them, brought them onto the boat, and then said, okay, you can leave now. And so they impressed over 5,000 sailors, and that's a lot of people.
Yeah, it is.
And
They made them fight.
made them sail on their British ships and become British sailors and it was a tough navy back then. And of course, Britain was the largest navy in the world. Those ships of the line were huge, and it took over 6,000 trees to build a ship of the line.
Wow.
Can you imagine that? And that was just one ship of the line, and they had a few hundred.
Yeah.
And those are those triple-decker
Gosh.
ships they had.
You didn't hear much about the rainforest back then.
No, because basically they were using the forest of the United States before they, and that's why it was so difficult for them to lose the colonies because of that.
Yeah.
But the reality is, the War of 1812 began, and the British had a strategy, and the strategy was to take New England, take the center part of the nation where Washington.
I think they did. The way they went in and they burnt down.
They burnt down Washington D.C.
Yeah.
And but they didn't take Baltimore. They couldn't take Baltimore, Fort McHenry, where we got our Star Spangled Banner. But
right, yeah.
the
Scott Key.
and the third aspect of their War of 1812 plan was to take New Orleans. And so they, with the advent of or the development of the war, things went very well for them, but they didn't take Fort McHenry, and things didn't go so well for them in New England. But they decided, let's go ahead and go for New Orleans.
And they did this after the Treaty of
Ghent.
Ghent was signed.
But
But they just didn't know yet.
They knew that there was a negotiation going on. They knew that it was going on, and people have always said, "Well, the battle took place 2 weeks after the treaty was signed."
Right.
The reality is, though, and Britain was counting on this. They knew that the treaty was being negotiated. They had ultimate confidence that they were going to take New Orleans, and it was in their mindset that, okay, yeah, we signed the treaty, but we've got New Orleans. What are you going to do about it?
What are you going to do about it?
And they were going to, and they didn't really care so much about holding territories north of New Orleans.
Didn't have to.
They didn't have to.
So everything flowed.
Because everything flowed to New Orleans. And so all they wanted was New Orleans. And so even with the Treaty of Ghent, if they had gained New Orleans, the story still would have been different. And that's why the Battle of New Orleans is so important, because our nation, if we had allowed that to happen, we probably wouldn't have ended up being quite the country that we are today. And so the Battle of New Orleans is extremely important. And the British Navy actually formulated the plan to attack New Orleans. And they had an admiral that really thought a lot of himself. And they organized a fleet that traveled from Jamaica, where they left England, and then focused themselves in Jamaica and organized, and then from Jamaica came up to the Gulf. And because they had such large ships, and it's so shallow, Lake Bourne and Lake Pontchartrain, the ships couldn't get any closer to Louisiana than Cat Island.
Yeah.
Which Cat Island's still there. And even 200 years ago, they don't know why it was called Cat Island, because there were no cats there.
Cattails. I don't know.
I don't know.
I just made that.
I've never been to Cat Island, but they did.
So they go.
So they anchored there at Cat Island.
Yeah.
And then they offloaded these barges type of ships and loaded men up. And to show you how dedicated they were going to do this, they basically rode 30 miles from Cat Island to where Chef Mentor Highway is. It's on the opposite side of Lake Bourne, where I think it's on Highway 90
Okay.
that goes into Mississippi. Well, they rode to that point and offloaded men there because it was a high point. But there was nothing there. No trees. There's nothing there.
Yeah.
Just flat
Swamp.
and swamp and
Alligators,
these
possums.
Oh, it was bad.
Yeah.
And these British soldiers.
So they're
not
probably
used to
like,
that.
what the hell are we doing here? Do
And
we
they-
really want this?
I'm sure the men were thinking that because it was
Yeah.
terrible, and they didn't have tents. They didn't have anything that they could cover. It was December. We're talking like December 18th,
Oh, yeah.
and the temperatures then they were
Or
recorded.
it could be 90, or it could be,
It could have been 90s,
40.
but they recorded the temperatures actually was in the 40s during the day,
Uh-huh.
and in the low 20s at night. And
Wait, that doesn't make sense.
and it was cold.
That's like climate change.
And
Those are like ice age temperatures.
well, they said it was.
Those are 200 years ago.
They claimed it was an El Nino year.
Oh,
That's what-
yeah.
And there was something that changed it.
I like the El Nino.
And so these British soldiers were out overnight, actually for a few days, with no food, no tents, nothing. And the boats were going back and forth, loading men on this point. And they were trying to decide, would they go up the Chef Mentor, where Chef Mentor Highway is now, and attack New Orleans that way, or go through at the bottom of Lake Bourne. There are these bayous. There was Bayou Bienvenue, and there was and off of Bayou Bienvenue was a wider bayou called Bayou Mazon, I think, Mazant. An Englishman might say Mazant, but maybe I'm thinking it might have been Mazon. And if you look at a map today, you can still see the remnants of Bayou Mazon and the remnants of Bienvenue. And so finally they decided they were going to go through the bayous and come up to New Orleans via the walking alongside the east bank of the river.
Okay.
So on December 18th, they started unloading men from that point, Chef Mentor, to the bayous, and they ended up going through Bienvenue and Bayou Mazon, but they were so shallow, and it was nothing but swamp.
Yeah.
It was nothing but swamp. And you know the approach to New Orleans on I-10, before you get to the airport, that cypress swamp.
Yeah.
Well, you have to
Bonnie
imagine
Carey Spillway?
the Bonnie.
Is that Bonnie Carey?
The Bonnie Carey Spillway.
Uh-huh.
That swamp before the airport. You have to imagine back then, it would have been 5 times as dense.
Oh, yeah.
And a lot wetter. And so these men had to traverse because they couldn't go up the bayous because they were not deep enough. They had to walk their way miles to get to the levee of the Mississippi River.
Thankfully, they didn't have mosquitoes. Man, if they would have tried to do that in August, certainly they thought this through.
No, there was no thought. They just wanted New Orleans,
Wow.
and they were determined to do it. They would.
They're lucky they went in December.
Actually, they really are. I guess from the standpoint of alligators and
alligators and snakes, everything's hibernating.
and it's 40 degrees.
This is the best time.
And of course now you're walking.
As
freezing-
bad as this sounds, it doesn't sound as bad
as
as
it
it
could
could
have
be.
been. For those of us who have lived it,
Holy crap!
they were
yeah.
walking, waist deep in frigid water, and
Ew.
then they started laying reeds down so they could walk on top of the reeds, and they walked for miles to get to the river. And at the river was this plantation owned by Villeray. Villeray, and it's known as the Villeray Plantation. And the plantation there, the home looked a lot like the house here in Baton Rouge called Magnolia Mound over on Nicholson Drive, just north of LSU. The Villeray Plantation kind of looked like that.
Yep.
Built up off the ground with a veranda across the front. Well, the British snuck up on that. They were having breakfast at the Villeray Plantation, and the British soldiers snuck up on the plantation and surprised everybody. And Major Villeray the son of General Villeray, who owned the plantation, was at the table, and he made an escape over. He jumped over the veranda and ran into the swamp. And unfortunately, his loving dog followed him.
Oh.
And some British soldiers chased after him and the dog. Well, he got far enough ahead that he was able to hide to some extent, and he climbed up this tree. And his dog was at the base of the tree, barking at him, saying, I love you, hey, hey. And Villaray's in the tree thinking, oh. And he had to get down from the tree. This is terrible. Poor dog. He got down from the tree, and he loved his dog.
Yeah.
And he killed the dog. He killed the dog.
Well, they had to.
Well, in the
Dog
long
was
run,
a traitor.
The dog wasn't helping him out, and so he climbed back
sorry.
up in the tree.
And I love animals.
I love my dog. I love dogs too. It just hurts me.
I can't imagine. That's.
I think they may have to catch me.
Sorry,
Arrest me, but bring my dog back.
I was joking about the.
But he climbed back up in the tree and was able to hide, and they passed, and he was able to escape through the swamp and get back into New Orleans.
That's an insane story about the dog. Wait, how did you know about the dog? Like, is that just made up?
No, that's a real.
Okay. All right.
So he got into New Orleans, Major Villeray, and he was able to warn Jackson. The British are at my father's plantation. We need to do something.
Yeah.
So Jackson mobilized. He'd been in the New Orleans area now for a few weeks, and he organized and mobilized, and they marched south.
I think that did he declare martial law and took everybody and put them around the perimeter of New Orleans?
Well, he did that after the battle, if I remember correctly.
Really?
It was there was a little bit of rebellion. I'll tell you about that in a minute.
Yeah.
So
I'm getting ahead.
About 2,000 men marched with Jackson south, and they set up camp pretty much where what they call Line Jackson, the line that Andrew Jackson had for the battle, and set up camp, was watching what was going on, and the British, they didn't think anything was going to happen.
Right.
Andrew Jackson decided over a week that he couldn't let them just stay down there and organize. So on December 23rd, he, at night, had a battle plan, and he sent those 2,000 soldiers of his into an attack on the British setup at the Villeray plantation. And he had a ship going down the Mississippi River with had about 10 guns on each side, so 20 guns total, the Carolina. And so the men advanced to attack the Villeray plantation. They had the boat going down the Mississippi River so that they could get close to the Villeray plantation and fire on the flank of the British soldiers. He had asked a general on the other side of the river to go south and cross the river and come up from
And just
from
squash
behind and
right there.
but that general, he didn't do what he was supposed to do.
He was like, I'm busy.
Well, he got drunk.
So we got,
Yeah, he got drunk. Now his men were pretty mad at him, but they didn't move to the other side, but that's another thing. Well, anyway, Jackson didn't attack until the Carolina, the ship, was parallel to the British location, and they opened up their guns and they started really wiping out the British soldiers because it was unexpected.
Yeah.
The Mississippi levee was only about 4 feet high.
Oh, wow.
Because each plantation had to build their own levee. It was not a governmental thing. Each plantation owned and had to build a levee. So there was nothing really there to protect them. Even the Villeray plantation was getting torn to shreds by the boat.
Yeah.
And then Jackson attacked with his men, and they really did a number on the British, and the British were shocked and very surprised, and they lost a lot of people.
Yeah.
Even when they shot cannons, and they had small cannons because you had to carry the cannons by hand through the reeds and all that.
Good Lord.
Even the small cannons they had to shoot at the Carolina, the next day or so, they fired into that Carolina, and they shot over 200 rounds of cannonballs to finally sink it and they only had brought over about 700. So they used 200 rounds of cannonballs to sink one boat.
Wow.
And so they didn't have a lot of ammo at that point. So anyway, Jackson retreats at night. It was foggy. It was, you could barely see, but the British were totally torn up. And then Jackson moved back to the location that is Line Jackson, which was on the other side of the Rodriguez Canal. And the canal was mainly a big ditch. And he went about with the soldiers and slaves. Even they brought in the slaves, and they dug the ditch, the canal deeper, about 3 or 4 feet deeper, and used that dirt to build up the line that they would hide behind. And then they opened up the canal on the Mississippi side so that the Mississippi River would flood that canal. And the wall that they built was about 7 feet tall. And
then like you've got 5 feet deep, so yeah,
you got a good height. And the ditch itself was about anywhere from 10 to 15 feet wide. So you had, if you had to walk in waist deep to
that's where the ladders came in.
That's where the ladder. See what they were supposed to do.
That's where the guy was like, "No, he's sleeping with my wife. I'm not gonna go."
Well, yeah, they were pretty stupid. They had put together these big bundles of canes, and they had it planned that soldiers were going to throw these bundles into the ditch, and they had about 300 of those bundles, and they were going to throw the bundles into the ditch, and then following them were going to be soldiers carrying ladders, and the ladders were going to be placed on top of those bundles, and then they would have the ability to get.
Yeah.
Well, there were several battles back and forth during the couple of weeks from December 23rd to January 8th, where the General Pakenham, the main commander of the British, made a couple of feints, I guess, just to make it look like they were going to attack full force, but it was mainly just to kind of see what the Americans had. The Americans had about 25 cannons, and the British at Pakenham thought that they only had 10. So they underestimated the amount of cannons the Americans had.
Poor scouting.
Yeah, they didn't have any intelligence. They had a lot of people that were deserting. They had a lot of British soldiers that would desert, and because they were freezing.
Probably they were American.
Well, they heard about
people that were just like, "Wait, I wasn't impressed with your fancy."
I am not impressed with your impressment.
I'm going over to New Orleans because they've got beignets.
I got beignets, gumbo, etouffee, jambalaya, and
it's 20 degrees out.
It's 20 degrees out. They were sleeping on the ground.
Oh my God!
They had no tents, and all they had were the clothes on their back. They didn't even have blankets. And even the officers were in bad shape because of that.
Yeah.
And they were there for weeks like that.
Right.
At 20 degrees. And you know how it's cold in Louisiana in the wintertime.
Yeah.
Because that moisture just goes right to the bone.
Yeah.
Well, that's what it was for these guys. And it was really bad on them.
Yeah.
And in a couple of those battles, because it was foggy and it was nighttime, there would be soldiers and our American militia that would be walking wherever they were supposed to be going, and they'd see a group of people and they'd walk over to them and say, "Could you tell me how to get to," thinking that they were talking to Americans, or they were thinking they were talking to British, and they were actually talking to the opposite side, and they got captured. That happened a number of times.
Yeah.
But finally, on January 8th, the morning of January 8th, the soldiers, the British, no one really knew on the American side that was the day it was going to happen. We were ready, but no one knew that January 8th was going to be the day. And at 4 o'clock in the morning, they started waking up the British soldiers that were asleep, and I can't imagine too many of them were asleep. And the British had about 8,000 soldiers.
Yeah.
When you include their armed men and then the supporting people that keep the army going. So they had about 8,000 men. The Americans had about 5,000. And the line that Jackson had created along the Rodriguez Canal was about a mile long. and he had the cannon set up in a pretty good formation so that they covered the entire field, which was the Chalmette Plain was pretty much treeless.
Wow, they had no cover.
They had no cover.
So the Americans had
And
cover, and they had the position. They
and the
were
position. And what was interesting is that during the I got ahead of myself a little bit, but the Andrew Jackson had for weeks prior to this been firing the cannons with hot shot, where they put the cannonballs in a furnace and let them stay in there for about 12 hours to get red hot.
Damn.
And then they put it in the cannon and shoot it to burn, catch things on fire.
Yeah.
And they had all those outbuildings on these plantations that were just south of the line. And so they spent a couple of weeks sending cannonballs into those buildings to burn them down so the British wouldn't have anything to hide behind. So all of the outbuildings were being taken out.
Is that like Jerry Lee Lewis's song, Great Balls of Fire? Is that his inspiration?
I think he might have done that one for perspiration. I don't know.
Oh, yeah. It's about something totally different.
Yeah, I think so. But I appreciate your effort. Yeah. So anyway, Andrew Jackson, he burned down all the buildings, and/or the British have torn them down to build the ladders and things that they want for to climb the wall.
Yeah.
So there are no outbuildings, very few trees.
Huh.
And so there's nothing there. And so I forgot to tell you, one of the previous attacks by the British, Pakenham had them set up a number of cannons about 700 yards away from the American line in the middle of the night. They set it up where the Americans couldn't see what they were doing. They could hear something out there, but they just didn't know what it was.
Yeah.
And so when morning came, they found out that they had set up a number of cannon in the middle of this field, about 700 yards away. And the British started firing on them. And of course, fortunately, because of the high wall, the cannonballs pretty much just lobbed right over and didn't really hurt anybody. Or if they landed in the mud, they just
get
stopped.
stuck in the mud. Yeah.
And the British were used to fighting over in England. I mean, in Europe, where it's you're dealing with stone buildings and things like that.
Yeah. Because that's what the cannonball. Because cannonballs didn't explode.
No,
it wasn't like Yeah, it just would not. You would just hope to be a really good shot.
And that's
Really?
that's pretty much
Like,
it.
you couldn't really do anything unless
So they were lobbing these things into mud. How are we doing on time? Because
I think we're good.
okay. So we're getting to the end. So they lobbing these big cannonballs into the
balls
mud,
of fire.
big
Great
balls of fire into this mud,
Which
and just
mud just puts
bloop,
great
and
balls
so
of fire
nothing
out.
was happening to the American line.
Yeah.
Well, as they started firing from this new location they set up in the middle of the field, they had put hogsheads barrels, that's what they called them back then, hogsheads, of sugar, because this was a sugar caning area of Louisiana, and they used those as protection against the Americans. So they had all these barrels of sugar surrounding their cannons.
Yeah.
Well, they'd fire their cannon, and the Americans would fire their cannons. And the Americans, while the British cannonballs landed in mud, the American cannonballs would land on a sugar casket, and the sugar would just spread out all over. And the British also had left it just mud. They didn't put their cannons on anything sturdy. So every time they fired a cannon, it dug a little bit deeper into the mud. And so after a number of shots, their cannon were aiming way up, and because they were sinking in the mud.
Yeah.
And the Americans were shooting so much at them with the hot cannonballs that the sugar was flying up in the air. And ultimately what was happening is the sugar was landing on the British cannons, and it was turning into molasses and syrup. And it ended up where they couldn't use the cannons anymore because they were aiming straight up, and they were covered in shooting goo.
Wow.
And so the British had to run out.
Yeah.
And so anyway, January 8th, they wake up at 4:30, And Pakenham has them attack.
They were like, "We're going for
We're
it."
going this. I don't care
It's
what's
like, I
happening.
can't do this anymore.
We have to
It's
get out of
cold.
here.
All my cannons are sugar coated.
That's pretty much it.
It's
They
like,
realized-
this is it. We gotta go get these guys.
Because at one point in time they said maybe we should put this off a day or two. And Pakenham says no.
Yeah, I can't go
I
back.
can't go.
I'm gonna get so much trouble.
we gotta take this and take it now. And so they attack, and he sends most of the force to the right of his right, the American left, which was close to the swamp
Yeah.
and Lake Bourne, and it was impassable. You couldn't get through that swamp with an
Yeah.
army. And he sent most of the British force that way, and he sent a nice amount of force to his left, which was on the American side by the river.
So I did hear that he sent a couple boats up the river to try to take some of the American forces and fire back. Like his plan was send a boat up here closer to south of New Orleans, take some cannons and shoot them back, and then attack them from the front,
From front and
yeah,
side.
to front and side. That's kind of like the same way they did at that plantation.
That's exactly right. They were going to do it in reverse.
Right.
The sad thing about it is his plan, Pakenham's plan, was to get those men on barges and go across the Mississippi River.
Uh-huh.
Well, they were 8 hours late getting into the boats and getting the barges across.
Yeah.
And then they didn't take into account that the river flows south, and so the barges floated further than they wanted it to go, and so they were 8 hours late. They were way off direction because of the flow of the Mississippi River, and by the time they got to the other
I
side,
think they would know.
you would think, but I would think maybe things
Maybe
were
this
so
was-
bad.
Maybe it was like a little chaos, because whenever there's chaos, you don't make the best decisions.
Well, that's
And
what
maybe
happened with that. That's kind of what happened with those reeds and ladders.
Yeah.
The general that was in charge of making sure that the men that carried the bundles of cane
Uh-huh.
and the ladders was supposed to go first.
Yeah.
But that morning, he never tried to find out where are they storing the bundles.
Wait, I think
and the
this is
ladders.
the guy.
Yeah, well, that's
That guy
I think his name was Mullins.
Mullins, I believe, was having an affair with Pakenham's wife.
Oh, interesting. I have to look that up. Well,
I think
Well, Mullins
maybe,
yeah,
but there was something going on because it was somebody that had to do the ladders, and he was just like, "I'm not. That's a suicide mission. I'm not going." And so you got 8 hours on your drunk captain over here who doesn't realize the
no
river
one's going
flows
on.
south.
Go south.
And then you got this love triangle going on that's not with the ladders. The British sound like they were a hot mess.
They were on drugs. Either that or they were frozen.
Maybe
They had no food.
Maybe the cold got to them. No food, no cold.
And and not only were the bundles and the ladders supposed to go first,
Yeah.
but because this guy didn't know where they were, he was sending people back to find them while the Pakenham and his army was moving forward. And so they didn't have the bundles and the ladders by the time they got to the
By the time
American
they
line.
got there.
So what was happening is they were advancing. Men with ladders started coming by them.
Yeah.
But the bundles never really made it. And so by the time they got to the American line, and really before that, because about maybe 3,000 yards from the American line, Jackson had them. They started firing the cannons, and they used grape shot and round shot. And the British were lined up as you see in the movies and all that, and they were the cannons. They were just mowing the British down.
That's what I heard. It was
Mowing them
decimated. They were saying, so he said, decimated is to every 10 to 1. And they were just decimated.
You could take a grape shot and you might take out 15 men in just one shot, and you just see the whole thing.
Especially if they're all standing in a line.
And they're all standing in line. It gets even worse as they get. They're marching.
Then they have to climb over their. Oh.
I know they're marching to this line, and then we've got all these American citizens and Tennesseans and Kentuckians who know how to shoot.
Yeah.
And they
We had some Native Americans in there.
and we had Native Americans in there. We had pirates.
Had freed slaves in there.
We had free slaves. We had Creoles, Spanish, French.
I did hear that whenever whenever they would have to send orders down, they would have to do it in French, Spanish, English and the native
Right, Choctaw.
Choctaw. Those were So like it was one of the most diverse. If you're going for diversity,
It was the first diverse army in the
was a
United States
huge-
history,
yeah, that was
if not the world.
yeah,
If
and,
not the world.
and they were and they
So they're marching, and they're getting blown to smithereens by the cannons, and they're not even in range of the rifles yet.
yeah.
And when they finally keep moving, and it just we're talking thousands of men that are moving forward.
Right.
And that's the way they did war. They met people in an open field, and they never really dealt with someone standing behind a bastion of mud.
Yeah.
And so they just kept coming. And finally they did on their right side, the American left, which was close to the swamp, they got close. They were getting real close to the wall, to the Jackson line, and they were just getting decimated by the rifle fire, because what was occurring is the riflemen would stay on the battle line, and they would fire and hand the rifle back, and they had
they were
3 or
loading.
4 people behind them loading rifles. So
Yeah.
all they had to do was it was nonstop.
And they were good shots.
And they were real good shots. And back in those days,
Dang.
you could load a rifle. An expert, someone used to loading rifles, they could do 3 rounds a minute. And so even if you had 3 or 4 people behind you loading rifles, you had rifles
They
out the
basically
wazoo.
had an automatic,
It was an automatic rifle in a muzzle loader.
an automatic muzzle.
And so they were just mowing these British soldiers down. The generals, the captains, the majors, the colonels, all the officer rank of the British army was just being wiped out.
I heard that they had to put one of them in a barrel.
That's Pakenham.
Packing him. They had to put him in a barrel so they could bring him back
Yep.
to give him a burial.
Yep.
Wow.
So what happened is, at one point in time, Pakenham had they called it, I think it was the 93rd Highlanders. They weren't wearing kilts; they were wearing gray flannel pants, and they marched diagonally across the field to get over to where they were trying to do the main attack. And Pakenham caught as they moved diagonally across the line, they were being shot to smithereens by the cannons and by the riflemen.
Yeah.
And they got to where they stopped because all of their officers got shot, and they had no leader. And so they stood there in formation and continued to get shot, just boom, boom, boom. And they would just stand there waiting for orders to be given so that they could move. Now, in our mindset today,
Right.
You're not going to do that. I'm going to fall down and wait till something happens.
Yeah.
But these guys stood up and took it, and just one after another got shot. The grape shot, they'd take out a bunch.
It's just insane. And it's
Totally insane.
Yeah.
Pakenham was on his horse, the general, and he got shot in the leg.
completely like a really easy target.
He was a very easy
If you're
target.
riding a horse
He got shot in the leg and in the abdomen, and it killed him immediately. And then his second in command got killed, his third in command got killed, the fourth in command got killed.
Yeah.
And everything was piling up. And all this took place in about 30 minutes.
Yeah.
The whole battle itself probably took 2 hours, but the main aspect of
They were so in the wrong position.
totally
Well, so I did hear that they went in. It was really, really, really foggy,
very foggy.
and so everybody here knows as soon as the sun comes out, the fog goes away really quick.
Fog at
Especially
7,
when-
gone before 11.
Yeah. So that was the thing. So once the fog had cleared, it was just like open season.
Open season.
Monkeys in a barrel.
They talk about the fact that on the American right side, close to the river, the British had gotten real close to and actually took over one portion of the emplacement they had there. That the Americans, it was so close that the Americans would just take their rifles and aim them straight down because the British were right there.
It's like your brother deer hunting.
Like my brother deer hunting, The only thing is the British weren't tied up like Preston's deers. And so they're just shooting straight down like that. Finally, the British, there were British that got into the ditch of Rodriguez Canal and tried to climb but it was wet, it's muddy.
Yeah.
They reported that some actually took off their shoes so that they could dig their toes into the mud to try and climb to the top. And finally, things were going so south that there were people that were, British soldiers realized they have to give this up. This is not working. And they put their hats on bayonets on their rifle and put the rifle up high enough so that the Americans saw the hat and they shot it. And when the British saw they shot the hat, they threw the rifles down and they started running away because they figured the Americans had shot.
They're not going to stop until we're all dead.
So yeah. the British,
because the Americans, they were so outnumbered, and the Americans over there, they probably think there's 20,000 guys down there. Like, they don't really know.
They don't know
what to expect.
And actually, the British thought there were 20,000 Americans, believe it or not.
Wow.
And so the British casualties were 2,000 men,
mm-hmm.
and that includes about 300 that were actually killed. About 1,600 of them were wounded very badly and died later.
Mm-hmm.
And then about 300 of them were captured. Pretty much, I think they gave up.
Yeah.
And then the British ran back to the Villeray plantation where they started, and they called for a truce. And Jackson said, "Yeah, let's do a truce," but he drew a line about 300 yards away from the American battlements because he didn't want the British to get close to the Americans outside. And so the Americans brought the dead and wounded British soldiers either back to the British, or if they're in really bad shape, they took them back to the American doctors.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of funny that the next day Jackson started the truce. He said, "Truce is over with."
Mm-hmm.
And so he started firing the cannons again just to let the British know we're still here.
Yeah.
And he kept the British kind of shell-shocked. That's good.
Yeah.
That's a good word. And there,
wow.
That is, people need to recognize when we talk about the Battle of New Orleans, it wasn't just this little shoot and didn't mean much of anything. It really was significant, and it was life-changing for the country, because we realized right then and there that we are a nation. And Louisiana, there were a number of people in the American side that had organized the West Florida Republic Rebellion. Fulwar Skipwith enlisted, so he was president of the Louisiana Senate at the time.
Mm-hmm.
He enlisted and he participated there. There was another member of the rebellion named Kemper, who was a real rough dude, and he could kill people, and he was part of it. The governor, William C.C. Claiborne, he was there. There was a merchant in New Orleans. His name was Tureau. And you've heard of Tureau Infirmary, and all that. He fought at the battle, and
wow.
And then the British didn't go away until mid-January.
Yeah.
And then they had to walk their way back to Lake Bourne. It was
back through the way they
had
came.
to go back the way they came, and it was
walk of shame.
That was tough. That was a tough.
Yeah.
But in typical American fashion, at that line during the truce when they're bringing bodies back and forth, the Americans, as they would wagon load these bodies and are wounded to the British that were collecting, they did a end zone dance. They were a little too cocky, but they pretty much let the British know we beat you.
Oh,
and
wow.
they did some end zone dancing as they brought the bodies back to.
Really?
Mm-hmm. The Americans only lost. There were 13 killed.
Wow.
And I've read a diary. I read a diary of a man who actually fought at the battle. I think his name was Bringays, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And he owned Hermitage Plantation just south of Baton Rouge.
Okay.
And I read part of his diary, and in the diary he said that actually during the battle itself, the Americans didn't lose anybody. There were no deaths at that point.
Yeah.
He said what happened is right after the battle, as the British are starting to retreat, a number of Americans went over the side and started pilfering some of the bodies of the British.
Yeah.
And the British
They were
didn't like
still
that.
not dead.
And
Well, some of them might have been wounded.
and the British saw what was happening, and they fired back on those. And that the 13 that we actually had killed were actually from people pilfering through dead people's pockets. And the British said, And now, like I read that in the man's diary. And
Fascinating.
that's I thought that was kind of interesting. That's the Battle of New Orleans.
That's just a crazy story.
It's really amazing. And had they lost,
Yeah, had the British taken it, I like looking at things in hindsight like that, because it would be a totally different place, I guess. Because the United States, and the way that it's set up with everything that it has, and all of its scars and low points, and it's still a pretty amazing idea. I don't know. So even because when I was looking into that, I saw that, like you mentioned, there was slaves that helped dig that canal out, and although slavery is just a horrible thing, that they had a hand in, they had no idea what they were setting forth 205 years later. It's pretty. Yeah, we're free enough to sit here and talk about this kind of stuff.
Yeah, who's to imagine what 205 years from now, what people will look at Here's My Podcast and will say?
Probably like, those guys.
They're insane.
Way too much time on it. Too much time on it.
That one guy reads too much.
Yeah. The other guy, that jack. Some great balls of fire.
Great balls of fire. We might want to use that as a.
I don't know.
But after the battle, Jackson, as they were collecting the dead and all, Andrew Jackson had his military band. They played "Hail Columbia," which was really America's first national anthem, and at least people kind of took it that way. And then the Marseillaise, the French national anthem today, that tune, and Yankee Doodle, and they played Yankee Doodle a lot. And so, like I say, after the battle, we were doing a lot of cock of the walk stuff.
Yeah. Can imagine bringing like a wheelbarrow of dead people playing Yankee Doodle.
That's
how annoying.
It's a little much.
Hey, flute, keep it down.
I'm dropping a dead person off.
Oh my God.
So it's
wow. That's
good. The Villeray plantation burned down in the 30s, 1930, and unfortunately, in the history of Louisiana now, that whole area is pretty much a petrochemical industry now. They have the Chalmette field there.
Yeah.
But surrounding all of the Chalmette are all these petrochemical industries.
Yeah.
And every once in a while you can drive by and they'll have one of those historical markers showing you where the Villeray plantation was, or Delaron plantation was right next to there, and Bienvenue, and so all those plantations are long gone. But
200 years later, now it's all
steel and gas.
Yep. Industry.
I miss some of the ruralness of that was Louisiana, really prior to the 1970s.
Yeah,
it was. I kind of miss that green space. I guess it's good to have industries and jobs and things but I do miss the green space.
Oh yeah, now you're getting like what do they pave paradise and put up a parking lot?
But
Put
up a tanker.
We're gonna get granola in here.
Well, your friend is probably gonna say
he's
those two are insane.
No. It's It's just a good story. I did some reading about it. I did a little bit of reading, but his story about the love triangle.
Love triangle. I'd like to look at it. I've never heard that one.
I know.
I'm going to look that up.
I can't. I don't know enough details to expound on it, but
I think the man's name they talk about, the officer. I think his name was Mullins. I think, if I'm, but that's he's the one that just didn't do anything to find out where the reeds and the ladders were.
I wonder if that's the guy, because supposedly the guy was like, no, I'm not going. It's a suicide mission. He's trying to kill me because he knows I'm sleeping with his wife.
I do remember that they were, during the battle, there were officers saying, if I get my hands on that person, whoever, he's dead.
Yeah.
And if Packen, I think that Packen said, if I'm alive tomorrow, he's dead.
Yeah.
Because he basically, there might have been somewhat of a chance that they could have gotten over the edge. And,
because they were outnumbered. The Americans were outnumbered. So it seems like we've been really lucky.
On time, or are you talking about here? You talking about today or back then?
Back then. Throughout history, there's been a lot of luck on the American side.
We Providence. God has been on our side. Providence.
That's right.
And there's a lot to be said about that. Mm-hmm. Well, I guess we have really bored people to death on
You
this
have
one.
extended your stay.
I think I have extended my stay.
Now,
how are you going to handle this one?
I don't know. Two-part.
Well, how long is it?
We're over an hour.
Over an hour.
Yeah.
Well,
but there's so much more we'd have to talk about. So I think splitting it up is good. That way you can
give people some time.
Small segment.
You can take us one bite at a time.
Right. It's kind of like a horse.
However, this story keeps on giving.
Yeah.
And so you might want to hear the whole thing, go from zero to.
Well, you can put it next in your queue. I think there's a song.
I'm cueless.
I think figure it out.
I am cueless. I'm sorry.
There's nothing coming up next.
There's
nothing in this queue.
Nothing in my queue. I've pretty much queued it.
Yeah, all right.
Cue balled it.
Well,
I hope everyone has a wonderful week.
Yeah, Happy New Year. Happy
New Year. I hope 2021 is so much better than 2020 for you.
Was it bad? Wasn't that bad. I had a good time.
We survived it. It
what?
Could have been better.
I heard I'm gonna end on this story. Okay. I wish I really knew the story. I'm gonna spitball here. Supposedly, you can take a moment in time, and you can either look at the negative that came out of it, or you can try to find the positives that came out of it also. And then it just depends on what you focus on. If you just focus on pandemic, race riots, it wasn't race riots. It was racial unrest, rioting because of racial unrest. I guess you can't call that right. Or what else was there? There was a stolen election. Can I say that?
Yeah, you can, because it was.
So there was a lot of bad things that happened. There had to be something else bad that happened. I don't know.
Well, I had intestinal flu.
Yeah,
that was bad.
That was really bad. But you know what? That's not all that happened.
No. I had a lot of good things happen in 2020.
Yeah.
Well, I did.
And that's the thing that I think where that's really important for everybody to kind of remember, that this life is horrible a lot of times, and it's a really painful
Could we
process.
say it's just hard?
It's hard, and there is going to be times where it's horrible, and that is unavoidable. So we have to focus on the things that are good.
That's true.
So
very, very true.
So
that's another deep thought.
So that's why I had a good year last year.
That's a deep thought. You might want to add your Jerry Lee Lewis Great Balls of Fire with that one.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
So, yeah, keep positive. Do something positive for somebody.
Neat podcast.
Yeah.
These words.
All right.
See you later. Bye.
Clap. Take a clap.
King Flubber.